So good day to everyone, and many thanks for joining this session that we planned today with Johnny from Spotnana. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the session today. And in the course of the next 1 hour, I believe we're going to have a few interesting aspects of comment from Johnny, which will probably provoke thought and conversation and dialogue amongst all of us. Our agenda as part of the series, and this was a question that Seth asked me a couple of minutes back, is essentially to focus on sustainable travel and meetings as a global priority, to get subject matter experts, enterprise buyers, industry partners to articulate how this priority is being delivered globally. There are so many markets across the world which are complex, heterogeneous market, unlike probably mature markets like Western Europe and North America. And in the course of this series, we would like to probably understand and share with all of you how sustainability approaches are being built across the world, including these markets, how we can build deeper engagements around sustainability to enhance the global ecosystem. My firm, Proconsul Consulting, is your series host. We are a business travel consulting firm based in India. There are 4 key areas of specialization for Proconsul, which is business travel, sustainable business travel, industry advisory, and then industry events, which focus on education and networking, one of them being the Global Voices series. My name is Gaurav Sundaram. I'm the president of Proconsul Consulting. I'm based out of Gurgaon, India. I've been running this firm for the last 8 years, and I got hooked onto sustainability when I did a certification program in sustainable business travel from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. And that piqued my interest into this whole domain and to really question myself and then start questioning others as well on how we were really working down this path towards sustainable travel and meetings as such. Oops, I'm sorry, I seem to have, I think I clicked the wrong button. Hang on a second. I think we're back. Are you good with the slide deck? I'm sorry, I clicked the link by mistake.
Yeah, we see it now.
Okay, great. So our speaker today, guest of honor today, is Johnny Thorsen. I'm sure many of you know of him, have heard of him, have heard him speak, have interacted with him on LinkedIn and other forums. He is the VP of Strategy and Partnerships for Spotnana. He was involved with Spotnana, which is one of the most talked about startup ventures in business travel and even the whole travel ecosystem over the last 4 or 5 years. Business Travel News named him as amongst the top 25 most influential people in the business travel industry twice. So we have a very distinguished speaker. He's done multiple stints across the industry with various organizations. He's been involved with several startups and businesses where he's been an advisor or a member of the board. And I'd like to just put the floor on to Johnny in case he has any opening remarks. And if after that, we'll get started with the question and answer session so we can utilize this hour to the best possible extent. So Johnny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gaurav, and thank you very much for inviting me here to be part of your session today. First of all, credit to you for putting this together. A lot of the problems that are coming back everywhere in the world with people I talk to around sustainability is simple lack of basic knowledge and understanding. And for most people, if there's something you don't understand, then you are not likely to give it a lot of time and attention during your normal busy work life. It's hard to find time to learn about new stuff. And I really think that's the bucket sustainability is sitting in right now. We're hearing the headlines. Just yesterday, United Nations came out with the last of their 6 kind of high-level report about the state of the climate around the world and the kind of the impact we're all creating on Earth. But it's such a high level that most people say, you know, that has nothing to do with me in my work. For my own part, I started realizing that travel was on a kind of dangerous path around sustainability back in 2018. I literally published my first, what I call the annual Green Travel Odyssey in 2018, where I started talking about the challenges, but also the opportunities that this will kind of create. And 5 years later now, I've twice published my annual carbon emission number. I'm ashamed of the number I created last year, but I'm putting it out there to create awareness. I produced 93 tons of carbon emission from business travel last year and from private travel. It doesn't matter why I travel, it's emission, right? And I don't know how many of you on this call even know how much you potentially produced last year, but carbon transparency will be increasingly expected. And you will be asked, just like, how many days did you travel last year? How much carbon did you emit? And the lower that number is, the better you are doing. So with that background, that's why I've really kind of gotten incredibly engaged in this space. I'm involved with 3 startups that are doing different things in sustainable travel and technology. And I keep pushing myself and anyone I talk to do more faster. But at the same time, you have to be realistic. This cannot be done in 6 months or 6 years. So talking today is a great opportunity to go deeper in some of these areas.
So thank you for that, Johnny. And I'd like to get started with our Q&A session with Johnny. We will open the floor for questions as has been posted on the chat. We prefer to take questions on the chat so that we can, get the maximum out of Johnny during the course of the next about 47 minutes that we have with us. So Johnny, for the benefit of our audience, would you like to give a brief introduction of what Spotnana offers the industry and how Spotnana is different from whatever is happening across the world today in the travel domain?
Absolutely. So at Spotnana, we are focusing on building what we are calling a travel as a service platform. Obviously, there's been a lot of people calling themselves platforms over the years. The reason we think we are kind of quite serious about it and we are walking the talk is it's open. So what we have built is open to others who want to develop on top of our stack. It's also cloud native. And for the technology people on this call, you know the difference between something being cloud native or cloud enabled. Cloud native means that every single data element we have has been designed from day one to live in the cloud and deliver value and capabilities in the cloud. Whereas cloud enabled just means you can access a given software package or the kind of the World Wide Web or whichever kind of a method of access you want to use. We're also building our own products on our own stack. So the Spotnana corporate travel offering that is live and in production is built on the same APIs that we're giving others access to. So we're literally consuming our own platform and API services to develop products that we are making commercially available. Today we have corporate travel customers buying corporate travel directly from us, where we are also the TMC of record, which means we are a servicing TMC for about 350 kind of corporate customers, give and take. However, we're also selling our tech stack to other TMCs. And last week we announced the first public TMC who is kind of getting ready to say goodbye to the old tech stack and work 100% on our platform. So other TMCs around the world will start working on our platform, which is interesting for suppliers, right? Because this is a new ecosystem evolving that you can reach TMCs around the world through without going through the old infrastructure. We've also said goodbye to the PNR. We do not use the PNR as our order management system or system of record. We have built our own cloud-based order management system where everything lives in dedicated data fields. There are no remark lines. There are no passive segments. There are no 200 lines of miscellaneous information in the PNR being scanned endlessly by RPR tools in the GDS queues. We have said goodbye. In fact, we don't even have a mid-office system because we don't need it. We are making our tech stack available to airlines. We have signed a global top 20 airline who is kind of a a few months away from launching a new offering to their SMB customers. And we have won an OTA who is building their next gen kind of UX on top of our infrastructure. So to us, that's evidence of the ecosystem or platform play. And finally, tomorrow we have a big announcement about a major partnership in the fintech world, where we have demonstrated how somebody can start offering travel without being a travel player at all. So we don't fit into any traditional box. We're not an OBT, we are not a TMC. We are much more than either one of those kind of individual components, but we are an open platform for everybody to work with.
Got it. So, Johnny, coming to sustainable travel programs, which is, I guess, the agenda for our talk today, what is the reality of sustainable travel programs across the industry? Are there things that are really happening in the right direction, or can these be done better?
So, at the high level, the good news is we're doing a better job now than we were 3 or 5 years ago. We have moved forward. Have we moved a lot? No. We had a small thing called COVID that kind of got in the way and interrupted all programs. But sadly, we are now back to the carbon emission levels of pre-COVID. And if you follow the growth projections of the industry, we will start growing again the kind of traditional 3, 4, 5% annual in passenger volumes. And sadly, that growth is bigger than the improvements we are able to make around SAF and engine technology and other things. So it's very likely that we as an industry will start growing annual emissions again. Mm-hmm. If you listen to the various ways of measuring the impact from travel, it's widely agreed that we account for about 3% of the carbon emission globally. However, that's using a calculation method without applying so-called radiative forcing. Because when we emit carbon in high altitude, as planes do, the impact from that emission doubles. So some scientists are saying that travel actually accounts for a 7 to 8% part of global emission. And do the math, if we are growing our emission level annually, while the globe as a whole is reducing, our share of global carbon emission will keep going up fast. That means travel will get in the bullet eye for aggressive restrictions and rules from the politicians unless we speed up and improve faster. Last year, I attended 2 industry kind of first sustainable travel events aimed at corporate travel buyers. One-day event in New York in April and a one-day event in London in October. In both cases, the room was full of about 100 global buyers who all admitted privately that I'm spending today because I want to learn, but when I go back home tonight, I'm not doing anything about this the next 6 months, most likely. I don't have time. I don't have budget. Without budget, nothing happens in large corporate. And it's not part of my KPI from an annual bonus. Without a bonus incentive, very little work will be done. So as an industry, we are literally just scratching the surface right now. And we have a very big challenge ahead of us, and it'll become increasingly visible to the politicians who will apply the pressure. I think that's my high-level summary. Does that mean we are not doing something? Absolutely not. Lots of great things are happening, but they are small steps compared to the size of the challenge we're facing.
So what you're saying really is that there is a massive risk inherent in the business travel space, or even in the travel space, that needs to be recognized and acted upon.
Yes, I mean, there's 2 schools of thoughts out there, right? There's one view saying that no, it's a human right to travel, and I agree, it is. But does that give everyone kind of the right to just keep polluting endlessly while traveling? Or do we need to start enforcing rapid development of alternative fuel sources, or alternative engine sources, or more efficient ground transportation for short haul? There are lots of areas that can be accelerated, but doing little doesn't help.
Question that's come through from Scott on the chat, and he talks about whether business travel industry leaders should advocate for shrinking of travel till something like SAF becomes par for the course. Is that realistic? Can it be done? Is it something
It can, and I kind of expected Scott to come up with this, and Scott is currently doing some great work around kind of demand reduction, or at least processes around, is it justifiable to travel or not? And yes, we can. As I opened the call saying, I emitted personally 93 tons of carbon last year from my total travel, business and private. That is not happening this year. I put myself on a very clear mission to halve that number. And so far after Q1, I'm looking at about 60% reduction of my carbon emission compared to last year in Q1. But it actually means I am saying no to things right now because of sustainability reasons.
Got it. So, Johnny, if we come to something you mentioned on our prep call, which is basically a matrix-driven sustainable travel program, is that something that is reality in today's world, or is that something that will become a reality in the next 3 to 5 years' time?
So I don't think it's reality in many places today. Again, as I said, if I consolidate what I heard last year from the 2 corporate travel sustainability events, I believe less than 5% of global corporate travel buyers actually have an active sustainability program in place with rules, policies, and enforcement. A much bigger number have measurement, but the measurement does nothing unless you decide to act on the data that comes out of the measurement. So companies should start defining what will be my key KPI for my carbon efficiency in my travel program. And there's no right or wrong here. It could be how much carbon we allow emitting per day of travel in the company. It could be a relationship between dollars spent and carbon emissions. Scott Gillespie is doing some great work around that. It could be a total annual carbon emission per business unit or per employee. But fix on a KPI that is measurable and enforceable, and where you can actually create rules around it and then enforce those rules. Because measuring for measurement only doesn't really do much.
Got it. So, so if we are going back to a matrix-driven sustainable travel program, you've talked about tracking it, creating KPIs. There's a question here from Sid, and he talks about whether carbon footprint can become the primary KPI or matrix that TMCs, along with cost control, would present to travel managers. I guess that's probably answered, but I'd still like to put it to you in case you have a further comment on it.
Yeah, and this is where the fun starts, right, in my view, because you have to accept most of the corporate travel industry around the world work in a legacy environment known as the GDS, TMC, OBT triangle. And if you ask any TMC today, how quickly can you introduce kind of alternative search and availability by carbon emission levels rather than price and cabin class? It'll be a pretty depressing answer, because those systems were not designed for that. It simply doesn't exist in the backend or in the data framework. At Spotnana, because we are new, we have already created a new policy rule that allow a corporate buyer to say, I will only allow booking of flights where emission per RPK, per flown passenger kilometer, is less than, say, 100 grams. If you put that rule in place, you can only fly Dreamliners and Airbus 350. You cannot fly old, 320s or 767s or 777s. They emit too much. So the ability to restrict and enforce carbon efficiency is there. Sadly, so far, none of our customers have activated this. It's there, it's not being used. So we're also showing carbon emission on every availability search. The number is always there, but it doesn't matter unless there are rules behind it.
So Hugo asked a question earlier. Does this happen because you bypass the GDS in Spotnana, that you're able to get this level of data and ability for a buyer to search? Is that how you enable it?
No, it actually happens because we have this cloud native backend. So when we search in either GDS or in Travel Fusion or in NDC channels or any other content source, everything comes into our content engine, and then we apply the carbon kind of injection of data on top of the raw availability and pricing content. So we then generate our displays and the displays have embedded sustainability data in them. Importantly, this is for both the agent and the corporate traveler. So you don't have an online, offline world where travelers are seeing one thing and agents are seeing something else. They are both seeing 100% the same all the time. And we would never wait for the GDSs to inject carbon emission data in their kind of platform. It wasn't built for that. It's going to be very hard for them to do it in a meaningful way.
Got it. So how can carbon efficiency in a business travel program be measured and compared with other programs? Is there a realistic tool available to do this? Is it possible?
There are lots of measurements tools out there, right? So there are kind of companies that are dedicated to carbon calculation. They call them kind of carbon management platforms, carbon intelligence platforms. A lot of them are using kind of a variation of 2 or 3 leading calculation models. But it's more complex than that, because if you work in a company, say, that has decided for your own operating business to use a certain carbon measurement model, then you want travel to use the same model. It doesn't matter what your TMC is using, right? Because your ESG committee in your own company is using a different model. And unless they can get data that are based on the model used by the corporation as a whole, the data are not credible. So calculation in isolation, it doesn't really work. Which is why the travel manager, the travel program owner, must find the ESG committee inside the house, ask them, hey, are we using DEFRA? Are we using Culture? Whatever we're using, and then tell the TMC, I want my data calculated in the following way. If you cannot do that, you must make my data available for a calculation service to do this for me.
And do the TMCs I mean, we're not here talking of Spotnana, but do TMCs in general have that capability in their system to provide this input?
So I'm certainly not, saying that Spotnana is doing a perfect job here either, but all the major TMCs, including Spotnana, we all have some calculation capability in place today. More importantly, a lot of the smaller to mid-sized TMCs are starting to kind of make moves that will give them some capabilities around this. But obviously, I don't know how many thousand TMCs we have around the world. Not all of them can calculate today. And as I said, if you have a customer who is a very carbon intensive business, say a mining company, for them, emission from travel is such a small number that it's irrelevant. The mining emission is their big pain. But if you have a consulting or a technology company, then emissions from travel is probably the biggest emission that they have. And then it becomes very important. And that's great for the travel manager. You can now become the leader in the sustainability strategy inside your company instead of hiding. Make it your area of expertise. Be the front runner in the company.
Got it. So I'm going to combine a question I had for you with a question that Rene has posted. So Rene from ClimateScore has posted a question which relates to what I'm asking you is, are these initiatives around sustainable travel and sustainable business travel programs largely restricted to North America, Western Europe? Or do you see a trend where it is becoming more global and there is a demand for more of this across the world? I mean, what is your perception of it?
I think at the large corporate level, until now, we have mostly seen US and European-based corporations talk about this in a public way. However, I know of several companies out in the APAC region that are very focused around this. I attended the Web in Travel in Singapore last year. The people I met there and spoke with from across the region, they were all very aware of the sustainability challenge. And for anyone on this call who is from the APAC region, you are in the fastest growing region in the world in aviation terms. Our friends in India, right? India will explode in terms of growth rates for aviation. That will come with a challenge on the sustainability front, because you will be subject to global aviation rules that slowly but surely will come into play. And this is one of the interesting dilemmas. Corporations can do a lot themselves, and they can make decisions and be ahead of the curve. But eventually, this industry, I believe, will be regulated by politicians. There will be a global framework for sustainable reporting, for sustainable kind of operation, and for amount of money invested into, accelerating solutions. And I have a hard data point around this. I'm involved in a startup called Invest Global. Last year, we published a report for the second year running together with Kappa, where we now analyzed 100 airlines on 12 metrics, operational metrics, which gave us a profile of their sustainability operation. Out of 100 airlines, only 12 airlines actually publicly report 4 key areas of kind of disclosure around sustainability operation. So even inside the airline space, it's not common practice to be, public about this. There's very little information flowing to the public domain, and airlines have to change that.
So I think you, in a way, answered a question that I'm seeing on the chat from Sanjeet, who basically asked the question of who will really drive this adoption towards sustainability. And you've answered that there will be increasing government regulation, which will eventually come into play and compel the industry to change.
Yeah, so hopefully we as an industry will move faster than the politicians, right? Because on average, politicians are not good at making smart long-term decisions and policies. It's hard for them to get it right. We know the problem in the industry. We know the challenge we have. We know our operating data for many, many years, and we know how many planes are on order right now. We literally know the future growth rate and emission growth of our industry. And a lot of mathematicians have publicly stated that IATA's stated goal of a net zero environment by 2050, based on 65% SAF adoption across an industry that keeps growing, it's probably not possible. Hopefully we will find new ways of accelerating SAF production. But if you look at the current numbers and trajectory, it's simply impossible. So we all know we will invent new stuff 10 years from now. That's a given. But whether we can invent enough in SAF production and alternative fuel source terms to solve this problem, that's a big question mark. And if you don't know, last year, in a year where aviation was still coming out of COVID, SAF accounted for less than 0.25% of global aviation fuel consumption. So this year, it'll probably be a lower number because we are flying more.
So how real is SAF as a solution? I mean, if you believe that even by 2050, SAF will not really present a strong alternative,
SAF is real as an alternative. It really does deliver a 60 to 80% reduction of carbon emission. So a flight operating only on SAF will emit significantly less carbon emission. That's a given. We know that. But we don't have a way of producing SAF at scale at all today. The world's largest refinery for SAF production will go live in Singapore very soon. It's directly connected to Shanghai, which is great. And that will become the new kind of hub of SAF production worldwide. But it's expected to deliver about 1 million. So it's about 3 times more than total production last year. That is great. It's a massive achievement. And congratulations to Neste and Singapore for making this happen. But that refinery has been on the way for a number of years. And it's still a literally drop in the global aviation bucket.
Got it. Just wanted to go back to your comment on your attendance of this Web and Travel conference that you did. Can you share any examples of best practices and leadership that is being displayed outside of these North American and Western European markets? Have you come across any examples of that which readily come to mind?
Yeah, so last year, I would say at Web and Travel, it was very much a state of companies, especially consumer travel players out there, were talking about how they were getting ready to embed sustainability information in their search results. So that might be that, hey, this hotel is operating a sustainability program. And that's great. But once again, to an end user, the traveler, What does that mean? Is it a lot of words that sounds like, hey, this hotel is doing a lot, and then it turns out they're consuming electricity from a coal-powered source, or are they wind and solar powered at their electricity consumption level? These are the data points we simply don't have available in the industry yet. But having nice words and, as I said, green images on websites and mobile apps, that will become standard very soon. From there to then saying, I will charge you 2% of the cost of your travel for sustainability impact, and I will allocate the 2% to acceleration of SAF production or to acceleration of renewable energy sources. I haven't seen a travel player being willing to do that yet.
Got it. So there's a whole lot of questions actually coming through on the chat, and there are a few from Mareike which probably relate to this point. Do you think building industry-wide consensus around sustainable travel is a possibility, or is it going to be mired in competition and, marketing supremacy between each other?
So right now, I don't think we can find consensus, and I'm saying that sadly because that's what we are seeing in the market. And I'm also saying it because with the Invest Global project, where we polled 100 airlines, and we literally had to squeeze information out of them that they, in a lot of cases, they are reporting it, load factor, fuel consumption. It's part of airline quarterly reporting. But when we asked for it, they wouldn't give it to us. We had to go and dig it up ourselves. So airlines are still nervous of using of just saying, let's all agree to do the same in sustainability terms. And airlines, they are the biggest emitter. The rest of the industry emits a lot, yes, but it's still the airline that is the big problem here. And I don't see the state of global travel finding a single consensus. So that means companies and individuals will have to demand more, and that will drive change in the industry. Global buyers, especially technology consulting, fintech, etc., who don't really have a lot of emission apart from travel, they have to go first and be the examples for others to follow. And then hopefully we will see suppliers, perhaps group of suppliers, airline alliances, hotel consortia and groups starting to introduce true a public disclosure of their sustainability impact. Once somebody do this first, the pressure on others to follow will be massive. But so far, I don't know any airline that's ready to share their carbon emission per seat at the end of the flight when they hit the gate.
Yeah, can there be greater collaboration between organizations like maybe BTN or SCIFT or GBTA or GSTC or all these guys who all have their own forums and think tanks to try and figure out the future of sustainability? Is that a realistic expectation, or is it never going to really get off the ground?
I don't think they will create the standards, primarily because they're talking to buyers on the travel buyer side and to sales and marketing people from the supplier side. The fuel decisions, the sustainability strategy decisions are not made by the people who go to these industry events. They are made by the hardcore airline operational people. And therefore, I think it's more in places like CAPA, like World Aviation Festival, like these airline-centric environments that, and IATA for sure, where we will see decisions eventually being made when the pressure keeps growing on the airlines.
Got it. So what is your view on carbon offsets, Johnny? I mean, there seems to be a lot of cynicism around the whole logic of carbon offsets. What's your view on it, and how effective are they in the overall sustainability roadmap? So
carbon offset is one of those great product offerings that have had a very turbulent life. It started out as a really good thing. I'm offsetting, I'm solving my problem. Then it became clear that a lot of the offsetting in the early days evolved around tree planting with a completely unknown return on investment timeline. But first of all, will my tree survive 20 years until it starts removing carbon from the air? Nobody knows. And how many times is this tree being sold as an offset? Then we have seen climate change destroying more trees than we can basically plant in a year. So it's a net losing battle in many eyes. But then the last year or 2 years, carbon offsetting have changed. It's now becoming much more tangible. And we are seeing new scientific solutions that literally will give you carbon offset in your hand. We have carbon removal from air. It's very expensive, energy-intensive projects, but it's happening. The early stage evidence is that it should be possible to scale if we have enough cheap energy available. But there are other new ways of removing carbon that's coming to the surface in micro kind of carbon removal facilities, where capital costs can go down to $500,000. There's a Swedish company called Quiterna, which has kind of come up with a solution for that. And now you have a low-cost, scientific, in-your-hand carbon removal process running, where you literally have a digital evidence that carbon has been removed for your money today, not 20 years from now. So I think carbon offsetting will come back in fashion, driven by innovation and much better, evidence that it's actually happening. And for my own part, I'm going to publish a digital certificate very soon for my carbon offsetting from last year. The 93 tons that I sadly emitted, at least I've managed to offset them, or rather remove them. So I'm neutral.
So I have a question here from Michelle, and I think it points to something that you just said. She talks about the fact that in Takeda, which is her company, they've already put in place tools to help travelers make sustainable choices, but they're challenged by how do you measure traveler behavior and whether they really exercise a sustainability choice. So any thoughts here?
Yes, and Michelle, great to have you on here. I honestly don't think you can expect travelers to make these decisions. The tools you use must tell them clearly, you can do this, you cannot do this. Because a traveler will always choose by schedule time or by preferred airline alliance for points reasons. So you need the booking engine to tell them this is off limits. It's an old Airbus 320 that's been flying for 20 years. It emits 275 grams per passenger kilometer versus this new, kind of Dreamliner or brand new Airbus 7 or a Boeing 737 that emits 45 grams. You have to tell travelers why you are preventing them from doing the wrong thing. But expecting travelers to do this, I really don't think it makes sense to expect every traveler to be a sustainability expert. It's unrealistic.
In terms of the future, what do you think the future holds from a sustainable travel, for sustainable travel programs? How do you see it? And is Spotnana doing anything in particular to shape that future?
Well, I think we're going to see more active rules that will, Michelle, you're spot on, right? The visual guilt play comes back in a new way, because by making it extremely clear why it's wrong to do something, now at least you can get travelers to follow the behavior you would like them to do. You can explain why, and you can stand by the carbon efficiency of this airline versus this airline is twice as good. Therefore, we don't fly this other airline. I think we're going to see those type of policy rules for sustainability become real. And that's when this becomes a game changer, because if I'm an airline and I know that I'm being excluded from the display because I fly old planes on this top 10 city pair, I have to do something. I literally have to step it up and either say, I will carbon offset the fuel that your travelers are burning on my flights because I want your business, or I need to get better planes. However, getting better planes is a challenge, right? Most new planes are sold for the next 6 to 8 years. So any airline who want to upgrade their fleet today is in trouble. It's not going to be easy. And the cost of new planes will keep going up because they are carbon efficient. So it's a great marketing story when you fly new planes. And buyers eventually should start eliminating the worst performing airline or hotel on a given city pair or in a given city based on sustainability performance. Say, I will not use you. You're out. It doesn't matter if you dump price. You don't meet my sustainability goals. That's how buyers can, vote with their actions and force change. because travel as a whole will probably keep growing. Individual private travel around the world, I don't think that will stop for a while, because a lot of people rightly think they have the right to travel. But airfares will probably go up in price as kind of the cost of SAF and emissions start biting. We haven't seen anything yet. I think it will quickly become 5 to 10% or even more of the airfare as we see emissions growing rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years.
There's a question here from Hugo at CDS, and he talks about, is there a way for industry, particularly on the hotel side or on the maybe even the travel side, to really normalize all aspects of data that's coming through? Because he talks about, you know, different standards that hoteliers have, maybe airlines have got the same thing. How does that normalization of data ever get achieved, if at all it does?
So that's a great question, and full credit to HRS for their Green Stay program, where they have tried to create a framework that allow hotels to report their performance. Is it certified? Is it audited? No, but that actually doesn't mean that it's not useful, because it's a hell of a lot better than nothing. And again, by having distribution partners, travel sellers constantly asking suppliers for better evidence, for better kind of data to give them some kind of a rating or scoring, that's how we drive change. And we need industry leaders like HRS, right, to do this and be prepared to even lose business as a result. Because unless you do something with this data, either expose it very clearly to the traveler or start saying, I will not sell you. You are literally not meeting my minimum standards for being a sustainable travel supplier. I cannot have you in my program. That's how everyone can enforce change. But that's a hard decision. And I know it's easy for me to say. There's a commercial reality out there that we all need to generate as much revenue as possible. But we can start putting a fence around how low we are prepared to go. There's a minimum somewhere. I will not promote somebody who is purely consuming coal-powered electricity in a place where they have plenty of renewable energy. That's a fair estimate.
So there's a question again from Seth, and he talks about whether there is a way for carbon impact tracking and comparing it with travel cost. I think you may have answered this earlier to some extent, but would you like to maybe expand on that for Seth's benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about two extremely simple KPIs for a company, but also for the individual. Count how many days of travel you have. Let's say a company have 1,000 days of travel, and a 3-day trip logically equals 3 days of travel. And then count or calculate how much carbon emission you had, and then do the relationship between travel days and carbon emission. And if you decide as a company, we will only emit 500 kilos of CO2 per day of travel. Now you literally have a rule, a KPI that you can drive towards. And if you exceed it, you need to fly economy class instead of business class, or fly the newest aircraft instead of older aircraft. You need to do something to get within your KPI threshold. So you can do this with carbon in relation to money. You can do it with carbon in relation to time, or in other ways. Or you can go down the route that the likes of Microsoft have done. They have introduced an internal carbon tax.
Yep.
Every trip has an internal tax that is taken from a budget that each cost center has been allocated. So they are motivated to be carbon efficient, because the more carbon they burn or generate when they travel, the more expensive the tax is.
So there's another question here from Spencer, and I think it relates to this phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, talking about being responsible from a carbon standpoint versus actually doing something absolutely different. How do you influence behavior? Apart from whatever you've said, are there any other really tangible ways to influence actual purchase behavior at the zero level, really?
Yeah, so dashboards, gamification are great ways of doing it. In Spotnana, for instance, we have a report that can show, for every active traveler, how much emission have they generated in a certain period of time. And as a company, it's your decision if you want to publish that or not. But by doing it, you are certainly putting pressure on the people who emit the most. I have to say myself, as I said, until last year, I just jumped on a plane and flew. I don't do that anymore. The number for me last year was just too much, and it was embarrassing. I know people who fly a lot more than me, and I'm now consistently asking them, do you know how much carbon emission you're generating? Most people don't, because unless you are a nerd and you care about this, then it doesn't matter. So make the data available, make people aware what this is, what we are talking about in numbers, the difference between economy class versus business class, the difference between 3-star versus 5-star, rail versus air. Bring up this knowledge so people can react to it and understand it. Because it's not about shaming, it's about educating and creating awareness, and then people typically will make the right decisions.
Got it. So there's a question here from Mugi, who talks about the fact that how do you implement, how can policies be implemented based on carbon emission? I think given the fact that there are so many TMCs who are not as evolved as Spotnana or some of the global TMCs, I mean, is there any quick fix for these guys to really start providing this kind of data point to their customers so that they can drive this concept of visual guilt or policy changes or whatever they might be?
There actually is, because a number of the carbon calculator solutions out there, they have open APIs where they can take any data file with booking data and generate the corresponding carbon emission number. So any TMC who can create a list, a report of flights booked, from to and cabin class and flight number, that's enough for these carbon calculators like Flush Carbon. I mention them because I know them well and I'm an advisor for them, but there are others who can do the same. So any TMC can create a calculation model, but they have to invest in subscribing to one of these calculators and then start promoting the know-how back to their customers and say, hey, I can give you a monthly or quarterly summary of your carbon emission. I might charge you $100 or euros for that, whatever the number, but I can do it as a service. Any TMC can do that today. Having it integrated to search displays, to active travel policy, that's where it becomes a lot harder, because now you're in the operating stack.
So you've given me a pointer to probably look at a future speaker from some of the carbon tracking products and tools on how they can really integrate with a wide variety of TMCs and solution operators. So we have Scott here asking a question on how do you feel airfares will change in the next 5 years? Are they likely to go up significantly? What's your view on it?
I already said it before. I think they will. I literally think that the cost of flying will go up because of sustainability pressure. It's the best way to slow the growth of the overall industry, and I think politicians will go there. I saw a question earlier, and about how efficient are airlines at filling the planes, and how much does that mean? It does really mean a lot. In the Invest Global report, we basically ranked the 100 airlines with their carbon efficiency, where we compared load factors, average segment length, and average age of planes. And we saw a clear correlation that low-cost airlines are much, much more carbon efficient because they put more people into a single plane. That's not a good travel experience. I'm not going to lie and say I love flying low cost, but if I look at pure carbon efficiency, they are the best. But they also stimulate more demand because they fly dirt cheap. So they're literally increasing carbon emission because they have many more flights than if their prices were twice as high. So it's not just good that they fill the planes, it's creating a growth problem.
So is this basically pointing to the fact that in the next 20-25 years, we're going to see business travel as an industry draw down to probably a much smaller scale than what it is today? something Ole commented on here, which is his view is that we double the airfares and we put in a, kind of create a capital fund to, invest in climate control and sustainability. I mean, what's the future for business travel with the whole sustainability thing happening? Is it going to die out? Is that a view that's realistic?
I don't think so. Corporate travel will definitely stay there, and we're going to kind of see an increase in price, most likely. That will reduce demand. That's normally the equation that works, right? When price goes up, demand goes down on average. But obviously there will be corporate travel around for a long time. We have a number of industries where travel is a requirement. The energy sector, the pharma sector, you can name them. So they still have to travel and will continue. But a lot of other trips, I think, will slowly but surely kind of fade away. And when we talk about return to pre-COVID travel volumes, it's very interesting when you talk to very large buyers of travel, they are not talking about 100% return. They have not even seen that yet. In the SMB space, we have, but in the very large corporation, most companies are talking about significant volume reductions. Budget might be back to 2019, but number of trips is not. So they are emitting less carbon, but spending the same dollars perhaps. And that might be the beginning of this new environment with more expensive corporate travel. And then short-haul travel might be banned. Anything under 1 hour flights, I could see the EU at some point ban that and just say it's not happening. We will not allow that from taking place anymore. Depends on where in the world you are, if it's likely, but as the climate kind of crisis evolve and accelerate potentially, decisions that are impossible to imagine today might become realistic.
This actually also points to what Ram said in the previous session. Ram is the vice chair of GSTC, and he did say that, this whole aspect of government regulation and risk mitigation and impact on balance sheets will need to be really hard-coded into the future in case we really have to plan for how things will be going forward.
Yeah, it's you can wear the positive hat or the negative hat. I actually believe that this is an incredible positive opportunity for innovation, for technology to play a really active role, and for people, especially the next generation of corporate travelers. We don't know if they will behave the way they talk. They are much more aggressive around climate, protection and environmental behavior. Will that translate into refusing to do business travel? We don't know. I don't think it will, but we literally don't know. And one thing that's fascinating, IATA came up with a 2050 goal. That was made by CEOs in airlines around the world who will not be CEOs by 2050. Why didn't they pick a 2030 goal of 10% reduction? I actually think because they did not want to be responsible. So let's put a goal out that's so far out that I'm not the one who have to achieve it. The next generation of airline CEOs will have some really big problems on their hand around sustainability. And we should be much more aggressive for the next 5-10 years than talking 2050.
Got it. So, Johnny, I've tried to address all the questions that have come in. There admittedly must be a couple that I missed. I just couldn't manage to keep up with the pace of all the questions. But thank you very much, Johnny, for all your thoughts. I'd just like to conclude the session. We've got a couple of seconds actually left. So I just wanted to share with all of you that Proconsul Consulting would be delighted to work with all of you in these domains, whether it be in industry consulting, sustainable business travel, or travel consulting as such, and hopefully have you participate in some of our events going forward as we go through the rest of the year and we do these sessions as we progress going forward. I'm happy to also invite you to episode 3, which is on the 27th of April, where we'll have Patrick Deemer, the chairperson of the European Network of Business Travel Associations, also known as BT for Europe, joining us and sharing his thoughts. So look forward to having you there. And thank you again, Johnny, and the audience, all of you for keeping this such a fast pace and session with the questions flowing in, and I tried my best to keep up. So I'm hoping that we can sustain this energy for the forthcoming sessions as well. Thank you, Johnny, again for joining us, and
Thank you very much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye then.